Their deal sort of length is usually between 12 to 18 months. Ours was 2. I do believe in synchronicity, energy, frequency, and things happening for a reason. I'm quite critical. I will only encourage people with really, really strong products.
Entrepreneur, investor, thought leader, Karolina Pelc, welcome to Diary of an iGaming Executive.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Pleasure to have you. I heard you speaking on the stage, iGaming Next, as a lot of people did, and you talked about the moment behind the milestone. It's one of the things that I took out of your speech. Talk to me about the moment behind the milestone when you sold BeyondPlay to Fanduel. What did you do exactly after you knew that that deal had been done?
I think it depends what exactly do you define at that very moment, because in those kind of transactions, there are quite a few moments which you feel are defining at the time, and then there's more steps to go. So, there's a moment of basically someone expressing really serious interest, and then the term sheet signing, and then the SPA signing, and then the transaction completion. So I think for me, the biggest one obviously was the sale of the business, or the purchase agreement signing. That's when all the investors have to sign, board members and all parties. And I've said it before, what I did right after wasn't very inspiring, because I literally walked up to my bedroom and went to sleep. I was so exhausted. This deal was really fast. I'm sure you can imagine companies like Flutter, their deal sort of length is usually between 12 to 18 months. Ours was 2. So it was unimaginable amount of work, and we wanted it at that pace, because otherwise it would have greatly influenced the trajectory of the company if it didn't come through. So we really wanted to squeeze that in a short amount of time, but we didn't realize how much requests and how much data research sort of point is going to land on our humble team of 3, me, myself, CEO, and our CFO. So I needed rest. I was absolutely knackered.
And the air just went out of the balloon, and that was what you needed to do.
Yeah, completely. Because I think, before you're running on adrenaline and you do what you need to do. So we were pulling 18-hour days. So I literally canceled Christmas and flown back from Poland, because the due diligence started on the 25th of December. It needed to start as soon as possible. So I don't remember eating. I don't remember sleeping. And the whole period was a blur. Also because of the volatile emotions that are overcoming you. Because one moment you're thinking this is happening, oh my God. Another moment you're thinking it's not happening. And you go from happy to angry to resentful to frustrated. It's just such a roller coaster. But I wish for everyone to have to go through that at the end of the day.
Yeah. And speaking of short periods of time, I think I'm right in saying your birthday is the February the 29th. You launched, scaled, invested in, sold BeyondPlay between your 9th and 10th birthday, in theory.
I love that frame. I actually, yes. And I do think there is a level of synchronicity in all of it. I do believe in synchronicity, energy, frequency, and things happening for a reason. And those 2 dates were very significant for me, because also 29th of February 2020 was a couple of days before the pandemic started. And that was also a significant event in my journey, because the product we were trying to build was based on social interaction of people who are based remotely. And when I first started talking about this product, and it was actually at the Casino Beats, I don't know, must have been 2019, 2020, people were interested and excited at the concept, but they didn't really understand why would anyone want to interact with other people online. I understood because I came from land-based background. And for me, this was direct reflection of how people were gaming in land-based venue. They were together, they were spectating, they were sharing their emotions, wins, losses, and I wanted to translate it into online. But for most of the people who have not been to a brick and mortar venue, that was an abstract concept. And then all of a sudden the pandemic struck. And after the initial shock of it, and, people washing their groceries and letting their cheese breathe on their balcony, we restarted sort of pitching this concept, and we got completely different reaction, because all of a sudden there were peloton, group ride bikes with thousands of people joining, and that experience of playing board games, chess, exercising, book clubs online together became a norm. So that birthday was very significant for those 2 reasons. And then the 29th of 2024 was my 40th birthday, which I'm sure I'm not the only person in the world that has this I want to plant a tree by the 40th, or I want to achieve something. And that was my tree, I guess.
Yeah, sounds like it. So you're saying that you had a good COVID, basically, because COVID was quite successful for you, or the outcome of it was what came with it?
I have to say, and it's horrible to say that, but I don't think I would be the only one in the industry that said our industry, has thrived during the pandemic for the reasons that people just turned into us as entertainment. But for me, it was also the fact that I think a couple of strategic decisions that were made around the pandemic, like setting the company as a remote business, because initially I was imagining this with a fancy office in Poland, inspired by all the bets on Flutter type of sleek surfaces and Swedish designs. I wanted that. That would have been a good idea for such a small startup, cost effectiveness wise and so on. But at that time, we just really had no choice. I was already in the middle of the race. I was already fully committed. I already abandoned my full-time employment to try to pursue this. And then setting up an office anywhere was impossible. And we decided to go fully remote and just go after talent in whatever country offered the best talent. And that actually turned out to be one of the most important and most successful decisions for us, because we were not tied into a recruitment vehicle in one country, and we had much bigger choice of talent to choose from.
Interesting. Yeah. You said there that some people before the pandemic doubted that there was a need for the product, a need for the service. Did you ever have any doubts? Did you know from the start you'd backed a winner, or did you have kind of moments where you thought, you know what, I might have backed the wrong horse here?
No, listen, to be completely transparent, the product isn't live yet, right? So I can't sit here and say I'm confident that this is what people want and what will succeed. It still means I had zero doubt throughout the journey. I think that if this doesn't work now, it will come down to being too early, or it might come down to maybe the actual user experience hasn't been nailed yet. But I fully believe that if we iterate on this product, if we learn from customer feedback and can offer a comparable portfolio of games as it is offered in a solitary standard mode, this product will take off. Because I observe younger generations, I have a 7-year-old son. I deal a lot with Generation Z because some of the startups I've invested in are actually operating in that space. They don't want that experience that we're offering right now. The experience has not changed for the last 20 years, when it comes to core experience. I'm not talking about the game mechanics and interfaces. So I do think there is a major change needed in the mode of consumption. And then you've got the responsible gaming angle on this. We're not going to be riding the free card forever. We're already very restricted in regulated markets, particularly UK and a couple of other very, very focused on player protection. This is going to become the norm everywhere. And unless we can position ourselves as casual entertainment, where people come with pre-prepared idea of the money they're going to spend, and they go there instead of going bowling or instead of going to the cinema without that, thought at the back of their head that they might lose all their life savings or they're going to chase losses and keep doubling. Until we get to that point, we're never going to be accepted as a exciting tech industry. We're always going to be frowned upon, and we're always going to be getting that dodgy label, which I feel deeply hurt by it because I love the industry and I'm proud of working in it and I'm proud of what we've been building. But externally, not everybody is able to see that. They see it through a very particular lens of high rollers, VIP focus, and things like that.
Understand, yeah. Modes of consumption was a nice phrase that you just used there. You've recorded a lot of the success of BeyondPlay and your journey with BeyondPlay in a new book, Her Play. In an era of fast tech and video and TikTok and etc., why did you go back to print? Why did you go for why did you fancy doing a book?
Well, LinkedIn post limit wouldn't allow me to put what I put in the 650 pages of this book. That's for starters. But, I'm exploring all kind of media. I have been building my personal brand for the past 17 years. I was one of the first people on LinkedIn. I remember times where people would message me via messages saying, thank you for curating my content for you, because the way the LinkedIn algorithms work was whatever I liked, then people who followed me, that would show up in their feed. Nowadays, that's all gone because there's so many people on LinkedIn, so many semi-influencers, influencers, and just people who aspire to that, that the content gets drowned. So that feature completely disappeared. And this means that LinkedIn is only now a medium for people who have the audacity to push through and really promote themselves. But also with ChatGPT and all those AI tools, anyone can be a good content writer on social media these days, because it's very easy to throw a couple of thoughts into AI engine and produce a perfectly polished post with a hook and a great CTA and, you know, everything that it needs to have. And I started to feel lost in that, because I considered myself a good writer before and my posts were getting a lot of engagement, but I no longer felt rewarded by that. So I thought, before everybody will be able to write a book, maybe I should write a book and, you know, pour my talent, because I do believe I have a talent for writing and I've had it from the early years. I just kind of lost the belief in myself somewhere between when I switched from Polish to English, because obviously as a non-native English speaker, I thought that I will never be able to have that flow in writing as I did in Polish. It then took years for me to get that confidence back. And, you know, this is the moment where I've sold the business. I have no intention to jump into another tech startup anytime soon. And I needed to pour myself into something to deal also with the emotional weight of slowly withdrawing from your company, handing over the keys to someone else. And I'm such a doer and such a 100% in person that when BeyondPlay was no longer 100% under my control, I needed that control somewhere else. And the book became that medium for me.
There's only so much daytime television you can watch, so you
Exactly.
needed a project. I get that. Okay. So most people would launch their book at the local bookshop. You launched yours on Richard Branson's Necker Island, which can safely say that you're the only person in the room who's done that. But how did that come about? And was that one of your moments, shall we say?
Yes, so there are a couple of full circle moments in it, and I do want people to read about it in the book, but I think I can talk to you about it so that I can encourage people to pick up the book and read those kind of stories. I went to Necker last year. I was invited there probably for the first time 3 years ago. It's an impact retreat, mostly for impact entrepreneurs. I was invited on the premises of my work for diversity in a heavily male-dominated industry. I was recognized as a thought leader in that stage, and I was invited. I couldn't justify going because it's not a free event. There are some costs to bear. And I was in a startup, I didn't even bring it up to my board because I felt that there wasn't just the right time. And then when I sold my company, that desire to go sort of resurfaced, and I was invited again, and I accepted the invitation and went. And when I was on the island, Richard is a huge inspiration to me. I write about it in the second chapter. I met him for the first time in 2009 on the plane while I was reading his book. I was pumped to first class. I ended up sitting right next to him, completely shocked, holding my book. And he just looked at me and he said, "Is that any good?" And I mean, I almost died that moment. So I have that book signed in 2009. I took that book with me to Necker Island last year. And I was on the panel there because there was a couple of different panels. There's a lot of fun when you're on the island, but there's also a lot of work. We have panels every day. We discuss sustainability, impact projects, investment in unrepresented groups and a lot of different initiatives. And he comes in and chimes in and he sits on the panels, listens in. And he and a couple of other people told me after my panel, when I kind of told people my story, that it's an interesting story and I should consider writing a book. And it was the first time I realized that the story might be more interesting than just for the people in the industry, that there is a overarching theme in it that could appeal to many different demographics, not just gaming industry. And because he was that first guy to give me those words of encouragement, when I actually started to write the book in January, it was also on the day that signed book in 2009 that I left behind in Necker arrived signed again in 2024. And he wrote me, "I hope to see you 2025. That's when I wrote my first chapter. And from there on, I printed out a picture of playing tennis with him the year before, the one I posted on LinkedIn. And I added a little emoji of a red booklet to it because I wanted it on my vision board that I want a picture with Richard Branson holding my book. So from there on, I was working day and night because I had a very short turnaround time to get to there. I had a word plan set up, I was going to do 60,000 words and 5,000 words a week. And then as I started writing, it just started pouring and I couldn't stop and I blew that target out of the way very, very quickly. But then, the book was self-published on time, taken there. They threw the most amazing evening, which another type of synchronicity thing is that I didn't know that the book is going to have a red cover when I posted on my vision board a picture of him with a red booklet. I didn't know that it's going to be part 1. And that emoji that I chose says part 1 on it. Mm-hmm. So it almost feels like it was all meant to be, and it was the most magical evening. And he's super inspiring. He's very humble. So he not only took the book, but actually took time to read it the first evening, came back to me the next day, said he's read a couple of chapters. He intends to read the book in full, commented on the cover, on the story of it. So, PR part of it is just one little part, the emotional part. And this whole theme of what this means to me throughout the years, him being the very first business icon I had, and his book being the very first business book that I ever read, it means so much more than the virality of the picture with him.
Yeah. Synchronicity, I think was the word you used, wasn't it? Yeah, interesting where it's gone. One of the things that intrigued me about the book, and they always say don't judge a book by its cover, but there's obviously a very interesting image, or dual image of you, one with a bow tie on, one with a bow tie off. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, the cover is something I'm very proud of, and it's very intentional. And I was super happy to say that Richard focused in his feedback particularly on that, because I wanted this cover to tell the story of the journey. So if you look at it, you'll see me wearing a bow tie, which is an accessory of a dealer in the casino, and not wearing a bow tie in the top image. Another layer of this, it's supposed to resemble a queen card, which is my sign of respect to the industry that I came from. But I think the overarching vision is also freeing myself from the need to be super masculine in my previous roles, working in a heavily male-dominated industry, trying to fit in at the beginning and trying to be strong, and maybe leaning more into my masculine leadership traits for that. I kind of feel now, going from founder to writer journey and speaker journey, it's also something I'm doing for myself to be able to step into the femininity a bit more. And I wanted that reflected in the book. It was very difficult to shoot. And even for the photographer that we had, it was a challenge, but I think it came perfectly with the message that I wanted the cover to convey.
Now, the people you would have been with on Necker Island, presumably none or very few are in the sort of gambling industry that you're in. And you talked earlier about how proud you are of working lifelong in the gambling industry. That's not always the perception externally, is it? And do you find yourself on the back foot trying to justify what you do and what we do as an industry? And particularly with tech people, I find sometimes a little bit snooty about gambling. Are you an evangelist for gambling, or do you?
No,
No,
I'm not. And this is also very explicitly explained in the prologue of the book, that this book does not intend to promote gambling as an industry, as a place of employment, as entertainment. I actually very consciously did not mention one gaming brand in the books. I talk about the companies I worked for, but they're not named because I do not want someone to be looking for them online and come across advertising and so on. So I don't think I'm an ambassador for the industry, because it's a difficult one to be that. And I'm quite ready to step outside of the industry myself, because I feel I've done 20 years and exploited a lot of opportunity. And it's nothing to do with me not wanting to be part of the industry or being embarrassed of it. It's more, I just feel a calling towards a different direction these days. But I did have a moment where I had to justify myself a lot, and explain, that the external portrayal of gambling is not always what it is. And last year it was very helpful. This year we didn't talk about it as much because the focus was more on my writer's journey and people were interested in that. But the year before, I did manage to turn quite a few perceptions from them only knowing about this wild, wild west type of stories, that Daily Mail will publish, to understanding a little bit more about the evolution, about the player protection regulation and all the things that the industry is doing. And then even pointing them towards, cigarettes industry, pharma industry, or overcomplicated consumerism, like no one talks about the dangers of that. Social media, and we are always being criticize the heaviest of all these industries. So I think putting in perspective for a lot of people were like, okay, maybe I don't have the full picture. For some, it wouldn't change the perception, especially if you had someone in your family that had a problem with gambling, the same way they would look at the alcohol industry if that was an alcohol problem. But I'm not there to, defend the industry or sing its praises. It's more like I work in the industry. I'm proud of having worked, and in the last 20 years, I'm very grateful for what the industry has given me. But it's up to your own judgment to form your opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right, that's where we are now. Take me back to the beginning and to Poland. Your parents are professional athletes, I read, and sport featured quite a lot in your childhood. But so did probably what a lot of people would call poverty these days, or certainly a difficult start. Did you find it a difficult start, or did you know any different and you were quite happy where you were?
I don't think I knew any different. And I wouldn't call it my start in poverty because I was pretty comfortable, My parents worked very, very hard to get us from that. Everybody has even nothing in the communism. And they, my mother was my very first example of an entrepreneur because she had a side hustle, she had a second job, and she was bringing income outside of her PE teacher job, which took me years to understand that this is what it was. But I'm an example of those people that had a pretty comfortable life in Poland, didn't know of much of a different life, but still I knew I wanted more. So this was a paradox, and that's where I dive in the book into psychology of what drives people, because there are various sort of thought leadership approaches where people divide entrepreneurs into those who get driven by coming from poverty and not having any choice, and those coming from privileged backgrounds where that's an expectation on them. At the same time, they have a huge safety net that they can fall into if they fail. And no one talks about the people in the middle that actually have a pretty comfortable upbringing, comfortable life, and there is no necessity for them to want more, but they always do. And I think that's an unexplored group. So I dived a little bit into these traits of those people because that's where I find myself coming from. I played tennis when I was a teenager. My parents spent all their money on my private lessons. I was given every opportunity for development that I could imagine. Did I go to private school? No. Did I fly a plane until I was 21? On the plane? No. So not poverty, but also not a privileged lifestyle. Very sort of humble post-communism, sort of growing family income and life evolving with that growing income type of upbringing.
Remind me not to play tennis against you, but
well, I'm pretty good this year because last year I had a break of 25 years.
Oh, right.
And again, Richard Branson didn't pick me to play on his court. And as much as you know me already, that literally just put a red flag in my brain going, nope. I am going to be on that court next year. So I signed up for tennis 3 times a week and I trained hardcore. I was like, next time I'm coming back out to the island, I'm not only playing with him, but I'm going to kick his ass. And this time we played pretty much every day. He still beat me in a tie break, which is unbelievable considering he's 74. But I did play. I got that time and it was probably equally as fulfilling as launching the book.
Good for you. So one of the things that comes out of that, for me at least, is the phrase work ethic. And whether it's a desire to beat Richard Branson at tennis, whether it's a desire to sort of graft hard and make the best of what you've got in Poland. Has that always been your guiding star, really?
I think so, but I think it was subconscious, because coming from Eastern Europe, we were brought up in this environment of if you don't work really, really hard, you're going to face so much competition to be able to achieve anything. So it wasn't enough to just go and study. Most people would apply for 2 or 3 faculties and study them in parallel. We were taught languages from an early age, and there were not one language, but normally people would learn English, Russian, and German, because it was still the time of transition, and most people knew that if they only focus on Poland, they're probably not going to have very wide opportunities. So they were considering going abroad and getting jobs in different currencies so that they're more well paid. So I think that was just naturally engraved into our personalities. Where does the rest of them come from? Some of it is inherited for sure. And again, by inheritance, I don't just mean from my parents, but I think generally the history of my family is quite rich, as most families in Eastern Europe. And, it goes as far as my grandmother being in a Siberia work camp, and that just creates very different personality traits in people. And I believe some of it gets passed down, as does trauma gets passed down, so does resilience to some extent, in my view. So, but I definitely have that thing of always wanting more. And I think the book is the best example because, I should have probably taken a break. I'm working, but my workload has decreased substantially. And I could have just lived a normal life of a 9-to-5 employee.
Could have done, never would.
Yeah, never would. And I was back into 18-hour days, copy editing the book, out of sequence, shooting, branding, all at the same time. But I just thrive in this environment. And it also was a lesson for me to accept that and use it to my benefit, because I had a couple of months in between when I had a little bit of an identity crisis, and I wouldn't use the word depressed because I think it's offensive to people who actually face depression, but I was feeling low, and I didn't know why. And I thought I should be on top of the world. I just sold my company. I had all this recognition and everything. I just went to Necker. Why am I feeling low? And I realized it's because I don't get fulfilled by doing little. I get fulfilled by going full speed after the things that I want. And there is a lesson in accepting that and just understanding that this is who you are.
Yeah. You mentioned learning languages and that sort of thing. I read about your dad learning English around the kitchen table late into the early hours, or late into the evening, I should say. And the fact he worked in a casino, and that's where you got your first start. Was it at his casino, or was it just the industry?
Yeah, it was at the casino that he
as
worked
a dealer?
at. Yes, as a dealer.
And how was that?
That wasn't a friendly environment back then, So again, I was very grateful to be given opportunity to apply for the job. I need to make it very clear that my father did not help me get that job, because he would have just not been able to handle that. He does not ask for favors. You need to earn everything yourself. But he pointed the opportunity towards me. So I worked there for a year and a half, and they're not the sweetest memories. This was 2003, gritty environment, sort of the clientele wasn't your American happy and chappy type of, fun cruise or grandma's 80th birthday cruise. They were there for different reasons, and we were not exactly at the time of Poland where there was equality between the customer and the server to some extent. So I would say there was a lot of stuff going on that nowadays would have not passed any sort of compliance or good manners check, So it was tough. But at the time, I didn't recognize it. I just thought, this is my first job. It is what it is. You don't like it, go and do something else. Go, I don't know, bartend or be a waitress if you want to. No one is holding you hostage here. You want to make good money, then you have to take that. I can't find any other words for it. And I found ways to just offset, the daily environment with spending a lot of time with my friends and partying, not necessarily studying, because I was studying in parallel, and it was the studying part that was being hurt the most, which ended up with me quitting university pretty much in the first year and a half for the first time, because I quit twice later as well. So I didn't see it. Actually, the book, for me, a lot of people say, why did you write the book? Yes, I want to inspire people. I want to tell my story and pay it forward. But I didn't realize how much the book is going to do for me. I only now see that a lot of the things that I've done can be inspirational, because a lot of people wouldn't have done them. Yeah. And I did. The risks, the constant sort of striving for more, putting up with conditions that were not the easiest. Only now I recognize that was quite remarkable, Before that, I just thought that this is something that everybody would do.
Yeah, interesting. So if COVID was an opportunity for BeyondPlay, Poland joining the EU was an opportunity for you to spread your wings and broaden your horizons, and that took you to London.
Absolutely. Yes. I've never been to London before that. The sort of exchanges to stay with the British family or go and visit London were always something that I was looking at in awe, but it was out of the financial reach for my family back then. But it always spoke very good English. My mother ensured that I had private lessons from a very early age. So I actually passed all the sort of certifications at the age of 15 and spoke fluent English back then. So when Poland joined the Union and there was an opportunity to go legally to London, And, the conversion rate of pound to zloty was about 7-1 back then. So this just felt like unbelievable opportunity financially.
Yeah,
Just
it's
that
not now.
It's not now. And I would say if they told me that the cost of living is also 7 times more, or if not more, then you'd balance it out, right? But back then we were just thinking, oh my God, my paycheck is going to be so huge. And a lot of people did that. They brought their Chinese soups from the country and, ate stuff sent by their parents in boxes. I did that at the very beginning, I have to admit. But I ended up in London, and I fell in love with the diversity of the city, just the diversity of cultures and all the opportunities. And I think I was walking around with like my eyes wide open for the first couple of weeks, even though that I had moments where I didn't have a place to live in London. But still, again, that kind of thing shows you the attitude that I had, but I think a lot of other people had. At no point during the very early struggles of my first sort of days on immigration, I turned around to my parents and said, can you please send, a bus for me? Or like, can you send me money or anything? I was dropped there. This was my decision to go. And I had to make the best out of it and, make my own bed.
So London's now your home, but before you made it your home, you travelled more. You were on cruise ships. You were in the Philippines and Malta, obviously, as well with Leo Vegas. Talk to me about that journey and how you got from land-based dealing and into the online side of the industry.
So after I spent my first year in London, I did go on working on cruise ships, and it was fun until it wasn't. It was a similar situation at which I just one moment realized I hit the ceiling and I no longer want to do this, and I want to develop further and do something more fulfilling. And that's when I came back to London. So I lived in London 3 times altogether. The entry from land-based into online should have been easy because there's a lot of transferable skills. And these days, I think it's easier for people. But back then, all that was focused on was my lack of office experience, my lack of education, office manners. I didn't really know how to use Outlook or send emails, So it was very difficult. And I probably have sent around 100 applications for every single online job available while I was still on cruise ships, because I applied for university and needed a way to pay for my living while I was going to study. And I was either ghosted or just plain rejected. So, and I've been given an opportunity for my very first office job by a customer I met on the cruise ship who, from very casual conversation, he was actually the one that instilled in me a little bit of, I've been talking to you every day and you have big aspirations, big dreams. Like, why don't you just start going after them rather than wasting your time here? This has been fun and you've seen the world, but do something with your life because I feel you've got great potential. So I kind of needed someone to switch that button in me. And then he has given me that very first opportunity. The book describes the whole story behind it because it's also quite interesting. I am going to gift him the book now, 20 years later. He's in his late 70s now. So it's going to be a very emotional meeting for me because I haven't seen him since, but we've been sort of sending each other updates every couple of years on my progress because he was such a important hero of my journey and opened that very first door. But after I've done a little bit of time in his company, which was a complete detour into oil and gas industry, where I even worked on projects to do with Chernobyl shelter. So I have a bit of knowledge around that, more than an average person. That's when I started applying for online gaming jobs again. And I already kind of filled that gap in experience that I had. So the reception was much warmer and I got my first job in gaming. And then that sort of went from there. So I worked for a couple of years in London. Then I relocated to Philippines to set up a mirroring operation of the London office in Manila and sort of train early CRM and marketing staff. And from Manila, I moved to Malta, even though this whole time I thought I was taking a gap year from London. That turned into 9 years being away from London. And I lived in Malta for over 7 years, started with Betson, and then was about to move to Spain, to Malaga, when Leo Vegas approached me for their very first head of casino back then job. And then I spent 4 years with Leo Vegas.
Okay. And whilst you were at Leo Vegas, that's where the idea for BeyondPlay came about, presumably.
I
Do you
think,
remember that when you sort of thought about that and what you were going, how are you going to get it off the ground?
yeah, the idea for BeyondPlay was a conversation with one of my coworkers who basically pointed me towards the patterns of how the younger generation plays. And that made me very much realize that we are not fit for that generation in the future. But I briefed this project, but the technology support just wasn't there. It would have been extremely complex and expensive. And we had a lot of different cooler and more revenue generating ideas. So I kind of dropped it. And then this was one of the things I went back to when I decided I wanted to start something of my own, and then iterated on it, researched this further, sort of checked whether the technology advancements would allow this now. And that's how the idea of BeyondPlay was born. But I think Leo Vegas, more than anything, it has not given me the idea for the product. It has given me the idea of what it is to be a founder more than anything, because this was my very first exposure to founders up close, Gustav and Robin. And I've never seen anything like that before. I was always an employee and there was a CEO, but there I got to work very, very closely with the founder. I was exposed to all his responsibilities that he gradually started to hand over to me. And I think it was that experience that taught me the most of what I needed to know to start my own business in the future.
Sure. And there will be people hopefully watching this who might want to start their own business. And one of the important parts of that clearly is funding and finding investors. Can you share any tips as to how you did it and how that came about for you?
Yeah, so the beginnings of me raising investment were completely accidental because I was going blind. I decided to do a startup, and BeyondPlay actually wasn't the first idea. It was another product which I just sent to everyone I knew that I had an idea that they might be investing. By then I had a pretty strong personal brand already. I was quite connected in the industry. I was going to all the events. So I knew who are the people who invest or support startups. And I got in touch with all of them. And they all told me, with all due respect, no. So that was the first shock, because I thought, I'm a high achiever. I've been doing pretty well at my job. How come? This is a brilliant idea. This is going to be the next multi-million-dollar business. So I landed back on earth very quickly from that position, and almost dropped the idea of being a founder. That was the very first moment where I kind of thought, okay, well, I had an idea. It was bad. Let me go and get another sort of corporate job. But there was a very good friend of mine, Tony, who kind of prevented me from doing that and sat with me multiple times saying, you need to give it another shot. It doesn't work this way. You have good ideas and you really have founder qualities, because I've been listening to you speak and I've seen you brainstorm, and you just should really do something for yourself. And that's when I started the work with BeyondPlay, started looking for investment. And that's what I said on a panel the other day. It depends on your circumstances, because I was privileged to a certain extent, but that privilege came from my own doing, that I knew people that I delivered for. And I knew that if I go to them and say, listen, I've worked for you before, I have a proven track record, you know that I'm good at ABC, this is what I'm going to do in this company, which builds on these skill sets, I knew that it's going to be much easier for me to convince them to back me than to go to complete strangers. So I had that pool of people that I knew that valued me. And I went there first, and I was very fortunate to secure that investment. Now, for someone that doesn't have that, unfortunately, you have to go through the trenches of contacting all the investors in the industry, and just, trying to understand maybe how to prioritize them, at least, because you can't contact everyone at once. But I will always say that in our industry, it is a very difficult journey to raise early capital. So when people come to me and say, should I do this or not? I'm quite critical. I will only encourage people with really, really strong products. If the product is meh, I'm like, you're not going to raise any investment, because it's hard enough for good products. For the meh type of, there just isn't a pool of money. So you might as well save yourself heartbreak, which is counterintuitive to my whole preaching of believe in yourself, don't get, brought down by doubt. But sometimes there is also the element of just don't embark on this journey. There's other things that you can do, because it is a very specific industry, and certain things are hard.
Yeah, absolutely. With those knockbacks, we talked about your confidence, we're talking about your work ethic and what have you, but with those knockbacks, did you ever, imposter syndrome is a phrase that's used quite a lot these days, sometimes correctly, sometimes probably not, but did you ever feel that? Did you ever feel, do you know what, I don't actually belong here? If these people don't believe in me, then am I ever going to make it work? Or did you always have the self-belief?
No, I had a lot of what I thought was imposter syndrome back then, but I don't use that word anymore. I actually completely threw it away from my dictionary, because I don't agree with that, the definition or the wording of it. I had a lot of self-doubt and thought I don't belong places many times. But for me, that was always a case of, I'm going to step into that room anyway, and I'm going to prove I belong. So the initial feeling would be, I might not belong, but it has never made me think that I'm going to walk out. It was more like, I'm going to come to the front. So I think that's what I try to tell people, that I did it subconsciously. It was built into me. It wasn't an advice of any motivational coach that I started to embrace. It was more naturally what I felt like doing. Again, it was this competitive side, or I'm going to prove you wrong, watch me, which I still have and value in myself. But to those that don't feel like that, I now give it as advice. Why don't you try to reframe like that when you feel that self-doubt? Because not doing something because you think you're not good enough is just not enough of a reason for me.
Sure. And I'm going to embarrass you now, but you're an inspiration for a lot of people in this industry, particularly women in this industry. Are you comfortable with that? Does that sit?
I'm absolutely comfortable with that. I don't get embarrassed easily. And, I try to stay humble with that, obviously, so I don't want to come across like I know this, but I've received a lot of feedback, and this is what drives me to continue doing what I do. Because for me, the most important part of my speaking, and, I speak at a lot of events, and these are not paid gigs, and a lot of people say, why are you on all these panels? You're not selling anything anymore. Is it just for personal brand building? You have a huge personal brand. No, because after each panel, I get, from 3 on a small panel to 300 on a big panel, pieces of feedback. And not just for women, but generally any early stage founders and aspiring entrepreneurs. And that's when I know it makes a difference to those people. Every time I speak, it's not a big effort from me, because by now I don't need a lot of prep. It's just showing up and speaking my mind. And for them, it matters, because they take those little snippets here and there. I'm trying to always something different, and it's valuable for them. And I had people to go and ask these questions, not so much seeing this on the panels, but actually going in person and asking that from within my network. Some of them don't. So I try to be that friendly character there that will give you some tips, give out some advice, and also kick your butt when you need motivation, and when you're at the edge of, I'm not good enough for this, I'm going to give up. And that's my side mission, I guess.
Fair enough. So if you're a role model, who are your role models? Who did you look up to, and who do you look up to still?
I have a lot of different role models, but I wouldn't say I look up to one. I have these icons that, as I said, always will stay very sentimental to me. Richard Branson is one of them, mostly for his audacity, the screw it, let's do it attitude that I naturally have as well, and the playfulness and this approach of doing everything and having fun while you do it at the same time. I'm a huge fan of Stephen Bartlett, huge. If you know Stephen Bartlett and know how to reach him, I'll pay money to pitch my book to his publishing house, just so it's clear. Absolute dream. I watch his podcast all the time, and I think his journey and what he's built is remarkable, and his diversity of thought leadership as well. But then there are a lot of people that I take pieces of inspiration from. So I've been reading all the startup books, watching all the startup series, and trying to identify certain behaviors or quotes or things that resonates with me. But increasingly, I'm realizing that my very first model was my mother, and my father as well, with their resilience and then their commitment to make up the gap in the opportunities that they didn't receive when they were my age and they didn't have the plethora of choice. They've done everything to give those opportunities to me. And I think I will be forever grateful for that. And looking back at their careers, both working 2 jobs at a time, both reinventing themselves from sportsman background to doing something completely different, building their own businesses. It's quite remarkable in those times. So they will probably be the 2 role models that I would highlight as the most important ones.
Makes sense. Well, listen, I hope your mother's not watching, because one of the most surprising bits of the book was the use of psychedelic drugs. And one of the things about psychedelic drugs is the loss of control. And for someone who is very controlled like you and knows exactly what she's about, how difficult was that to let yourself go?
It was very difficult. And I mean, to start with, I would say, just to clear any doubt, I went to sit with the psychedelics in place where it was facilitated in a legal and safe manner in a country where there is no legal constraints. It was very difficult. And it was, I don't want to sound cliche, but I do think it's a life-changing experience for someone with that strong need for control and with a very strong ego. And by strong ego, I don't mean in an arrogant way, but just very strong perception of who you are. This can throw you at the deep end of starting to question who you are and start all over again. So, I discovered a lot of connection between struggling in a founder's journey where the pressure is fully on you for everything, and childhood traumas and generational traumas and all those kind of subjects. And I just wasn't getting the results or the outcomes that I would have expected from conventional therapy, which I also tried, because I'm not going to lie, there was a moment in the startup journey where I was on the edge of burnout, and I started seeing someone because I was worried that this was going to go further. And it just, obviously it had some results, but it wasn't fast enough for me, to be fixed. But that didn't happen. And not that the other alternative way fixed me, but I think it opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And as a matter of fact, the book was a very strong message that was coming through of share your story, and whether that's for yourself to heal certain things in yourself or whether that's for someone else to benefit, I don't know yet. But I had to listen to that message. So that's how it came about. It was, it was something that was recommended to me by people who I immensely respect, who are hugely successful and really, really visionary people. So I trusted that recommendation fully, and it has not disappointed me since.
Very good. Well, there are no moral judgments on this podcast, so don't worry. How important to you is your Polish identity? You've obviously traveled the world. You've lived in different parts of the world. Are you a Pole first and foremost, or are you a citizen of the world?
I'm a citizen of the world. I respect my Polish legacy and my upbringing. I obviously care about the country. I still have a very close tie with the country because I spend probably 3 months a year working remotely from Poland. I care deeply about my son speaking fluent Polish so that he can communicate with my parents, and he does. My nanny is Polish for that very reason, so he doesn't even have an accent, which I'm very, very proud of. And, I go vote and I follow the politics and obviously and socio-economical developments. But I don't know if I want to live there again. And to be honest, there's this element of once you've been an expat in 7 different countries and lived got used to that living on maybe not on a suitcase, but ready to pack up your life at any time, which I'm still in because I still don't feel like I'm 100% settled in London forever. You don't feel restricted to anywhere, but you also don't feel home anywhere anymore. And there's always something missing. So when you're in London, you're missing the Polish food and the family and the friends. Most of my closest friends are still in Poland because we've been keeping in touch across years. We go to each other's weddings, we go for holidays together. So those legacy friendships are still sort of the most important ones in my life. But, I just find it that everywhere there is something. And the weather isn't great in London, but then it's too hot in Malta. And I like the smell of freshly cut grass in London. So you just start to be very demanding on what you would want from one place. At the same time, you learn to be very adaptable of what you're willing to accept at the benefit of something else.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll swap with you because I like Polish sausage and mushrooms. So not those mushrooms, the edible mushrooms.
Yeah.
But you mentioned your son. And obviously you've talked about how hard you worked starting, founding, scaling up, selling, etc. BeyondPlay. Do you have any regrets? Were you always present? And did your success come at a cost?
No, I have no regrets. I wasn't always present. And yes, it did come at the cost of not being present. But I did what I did for his better future. So I absolutely have zero regrets about that. He is being brought up in a house of sort of equal contribution from both parents. There is no standardized gender roles in our household. So I think this is a healthy upbringing. I think it's great for him to know that a mom can be a tech founder. He was a huge fan. He's been wearing BeyondPlay hoodies and t-shirt as his only attire for majority of our BeyondPlay journey. So very, very proud kid. I had to make sure that he doesn't wear it to school because obviously it's a gambling brand at the end of the day. He does think my book is super boring. For a 7-year-old, I can kind of understand the volume end of it.
Don't put that quote on the back.
He actually put a little note on my book because he was, going through the chapters at some point, and he pointed to one chapter and says, "Mommy, there is an F word in here." So I have a copy at home in which there's a huge warning on the book that there is an F word in this book. And I said, "Darling, there's many F words in this book for a reason." So yeah, going back to this, I don't have any regrets. I think it came at the cost of, I was not at every school pickup. I was not at school drop-off. At the same time, I made sure I don't miss the really memorable experiences, the nativity play and the races. I have an example of traveling to Australia to meet my investors and coming back straight off a flight into a sports day where I wanted to watch him race. And then there was a race for the parents, and I was after 38 hours of traveling straight, and I still won that race. So
I wouldn't have expected anything else.
Exactly. So it is what it is. I think my son is gonna grow up to have big plans and ambitions. And I was saying that on the island when we were on Necker, one of the most touching moments was Richard Branson playing a video as a tribute to his late mom. And he said in there that she was always a dreamer, which is one of the main reasons why he became a dreamer. And this was the moment where I realized, if by the time my son is an adult, he refers to me as a dreamer, that is my mom job well done.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. As a question, me asking you if you had any regrets, this is a question for me really rather than you, but would I have asked you that question if you were a male CEO, do you think? Do you think that is bias on my part because you're a woman and a woman founder?
Maybe, but I don't take it as that. I guess I've come to look at this from different subjects. I think in this day and age, you would ask the same question to a male CEO, because I think men are coming now to terms with the fact that they can speak up about wanting to be a present father, that they can go to the school pickup, that they can miss a board meeting if there's an nativity play. So I think before it was only expected of females to sort of, at the beginning, it was expected for no one to raise it. But then if a female raised it, then it was kind of sort of accepted. But if a man raised it, he would be seen as weak. I don't think it's the case anymore. So you could ask the same questions. But even if you asked it to me, I wouldn't see it as BS, because I do feel we have to admit that men and women are different. And that whole guilt tripping thing, it's scientifically proven to be more of a trait of women. So it's a natural question that you ask a woman. There's no reason not to ask a man about that too. But in the context of a female founder, I think it's perfectly natural, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, I will ask a man, I promise. That makes me feel better. Thank you. So let's look into the future now. obviously your journey at some point will come to an end in terms of what you're doing now. What would you like to do next? What's on the horizon for you?
I have many ideas about what I want to do next, but I've taken some time just very recently after Necker to realize I actually need a break, because I've been working since I was 18, nonstop. The only break I had was my paternity, and it was absolutely not a break. I've worked harder when my son was 0 to 12 months old than I've worked at any job in my life. So I feel like I deserve to just do nothing for a bit. I was at the edge of, joining a VC as a partner, maybe a junior partner, or advising and working with startups. And I do mentor quite a few startups, some pro bono, some as an investor. But I just want to rest a bit. And I want to wake up in the morning with that feeling of, if I want to sleep in, I can sleep in. If I want to do nothing today, I can do nothing today, because I haven't had that at all. But there will be the theme of the book and my public speaking. So I do want to venture out of speaking on industry panels. I want to speak on big stages. I've done professional speaking training with one of sort of leading speaker coaches in Europe, and I intend to put that to use, especially after my Valletta keynote. Again, it was a lot of fear from me, because it was something very different. I usually speak about product and practical advice and share tips, and this was very Tony Robbins motivational type of thing. But it still resonated, maybe not with the full room, because there was a lot of people for whom they don't need that kind of motivation, but it resonated with enough people for me to know that this is what I want to do. So for me, the book and the keynote journey, which takes me to events where I can do book signings and sort of, do female-oriented workshops or empowerment for early entrepreneurs. This is where I see myself growing the next couple of years. And then there are things that I will always be doing, which is product. I'm exploring a couple of AI ideas in mental health wellness with some of the entrepreneurs I met on Necker, because we operate with the same sort of industry interests. So it's easier to brainstorm. So there will likely be another startup eventually, but probably not just yet. And I'm not sure whether this or another industry.
Okay, well, lots going on. Well, before you have your rest, we always finish these podcasts with 3 quick-fire questions, right? And the first is, if there was any singer or musician that you could choose as your favorite, who would that be?
I want to say Nick Carter from Backstreet Boys, but that is just so ridiculous.
Why not?
I love Teddy Swims. I love his music, and when it comes to actually music that my ear can stand listening to, that would be him. Now, when it comes to sentiment and my early, childhood years, Nick Carter was my absolute idol.
Okay. Well, whether it's with Teddy Swims or not, your last meal on Earth, what would you have to eat?
I will be very boring on that. It would be a medium rare steak with rocket parmesan and grilled tomatoes. It's something I'm having 3 times a week for the past 4 years. I follow a keto diet, so my repertoire of food is quite restricted, but I absolutely love it, and I wouldn't choose anything different.
Nothing wrong with that. And if you were to give some advice for the next generation of iGaming executives, what would that be?
Executives or founders?
Either. You tell me.
I always go back to this. It's my tattoo, and it's my reframe on rejection or failure. Rather than asking yourself, what if you fall? Ask yourself, what if you fly? Because your brain does not distinguish from the situation you're in. It does drive you forward depending on how you position yourself. So if you're going to believe you can fly, things are going to naturally happen to help you fly. If you're going to believe that you're going to fall, you're going to find more obstacles that are eventually going to make you fall. So that would be the advice. I think it's applicable to both career and business.
Excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Karolina. Thank you very much.
Likewise.
I hope people thoroughly enjoy the book, and I hope it flies.
Thank you very much. So the book will be on sale eventually, and I will be announcing this on LinkedIn. I am kind of in the middle of deciding a further self-publishing route versus a publisher, because I received quite a few inquiries, surprisingly, after the Necker release. But I will be updating. I want this book in people's hands pretty soon. So
excellent. Wish you well.
thank
Thanks
you very
for joining
much.
us. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.